Let's retrace the main events in the audio frequency circuits. The microphone brings about a pulsating direct current. The transformer changes this to an alternating current. Vacuum tubes amplify this alternating current, which then goes to the modulator.
Molecules containing more than one atom can rotate and vibrate. Sometimes vibration is simple in form. We can see that each vibrational mode has a different frequency, and all of the patterns of vibration may be different. Each of the vibrations is a simple harmonic motion.
The same peaked wave triggers a pulse-forming circuit, which creates a new waveform, pulses with flat tops. Notice that throughout these changes, the exact subdivisions of our second and time have not been lost. We still have precisely the same number of positive peaks per second.
Pulsating direct current. Pulsating direct current.
If the sine wave's frequency is 1,000 cycles a second, we have actually divided 1 second into 1,000 equal parts. But in this sine wave, it's impossible to tell where each thousandth of a second begins and ends. That's why it's changed into this, a peaked wave, which can be measured from positive peak to positive peak.
The microphone brings about a pulsating direct current. Vacuum tubes amplify this alternating current, which then goes to the modulator.
Introducing the Dumble whose door is always open. Gandalf without the gray or the white because he's all black. Geordie LaForge captaining this enterprise. The Swag King with the crown, shout out to Sunday Swagger. The long-lost homie of Zach Morris and AC Slater, since y'all got jokes. Sweet Chocolate Jesus, as proclaimed by Roman of the Empire himself, and the man running up the chimney because he wants all the smoke. Let's talk about it. And here's your host, LeftEye E.G.O.
All right, guys, welcome to another episode of LeftEye at Night. You guys know me by the introduction, but I will bring you to the stage the comic book creator of a brutal yet grounded comic book series known as the Ghetto Dragon, and also the man that also says, let's talk about it. Coming live to the stage, we've got the man with the plan, Julius Freeman, aka Lucid Comic Productions. How are we doing, sir?
Yeah, I'm doing well, man. How you doing? Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem at all. All right, glad you could join us to talk about a pretty awesome comic that I personally have read for both volumes, and I'm not gonna lie, left me on a cliffhanger in both. You will be surprised at the twists and turns of this very gritty and grounded story. But just gonna get right into it. And first of all, guys, thank you so much for your patience. I know sometimes we have a plan of one start time and life happens, so we had to start the time that we have when life happens. But thank you so much for you all's patience this evening.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. No problem. So we've also got all the links for Julius's Kickstarter, where you can find him on X, IG. The whole thing is in the description of this YouTube link on there. So, gonna get right into it when you are ready, sir. First things first, just general questions I ask all creators. What got you interested in writing your own comics?
Ooh, good question. It was after reading V for Vendetta. If I'm,
Okay.
that's the go-to. That was the book that really turned the switch on in my head.
Okay.
Where before then it was, I was a consumer. I just bought comics, read them, and enjoyed them. Obviously, collected them, and went to the comic shops, talk shop with all of the employees there, and also the other customers, and we would obviously have our good times talking about comics and stories and what have you. And so, yeah, V for Vendetta was the first time when I read something that, first of all, moved me emotionally, like in the same way like a good movie or a good TV show would do.
Right.
And so when after I read V for Vendetta and I started looking into, because I knew who Alan Moore was, obviously, and I after that I started researching V for like the production of V for Vendetta and how it came about. And when I came down to, wait a second, this was created out of thin air by these two guys. Like they just got together one day and said, hey, I got this idea for a story and here it is. And the artist, David Lloyd, was like, oh, great, this is cool. I got this idea too. And they started sharing ideas. And then eventually it blossomed into V for Vendetta. And once I learned that, I was like, wait a minute. So anyone can make a comic book if they just put their mind to it? And that was it. That was the switch that went on. And then after that, that's when I decided to pursue writing comics.
I got you. Yeah, that's what I was double checking, because I mean, you said that you've been collecting for around 25 years, but that V for Vendetta was the one that transformed you inside and out. Was there anything particular, like a panel or there was a quote? I know that you said that, hey, the thought that anyone could make it is fantastic. This is a spark.
Yeah.
But I mean, was there a panel or like a quote during that you were watching that said, hey, this is what's changing me inside and out?
It wasn't so much a quote or a specific panel. It was the sequential sequence of the story that invoked something fierce in me on a human level. So it was like a whole, like, 3 or 4 page. It was an entire chapter when I actually lost myself to the whole part of the story, which was, it was the scene when Evie finds out that V was her tormentor when she thought she was imprisoned in that fascist prison. And, then of course she finds out that she was in V's compound the whole time. And then of course she's going through all these emotions about, how could you do this to me? You pretty much dehumanized me. You listing all the horrible things that he did to her. And then it was that moment when he tells her, like, you needed to experience what I experienced, so that way you could fully understand what it takes to do what I'm doing or what I'm doing now. And then of course it was that rooftop scene where she's completely naked, completely vulnerable, and he tells her, just open your arms up, embrace it. And this is the exact same feeling I had when I finally had my mental liberation from the imprisonment. And that was the moment where I was like, oh, it was a gut punch, in other words. And it was the first time that really a comic book actually made me feel that way. You know what I mean? Like, when you watch a good movie, like a Saving Private Ryan, or any movie that's heavy, that has a heavy subject matter, and by the end of it, or the climactic scene where you're feeling like a triumph for the characters that you've been watching in the movie. And I kind of felt the same way with the comic book.
Okay, so hold on. So you felt like you were it sounded like you said you felt like you were in a mental prison of some sort too prior to reading this?
No. I meant like I'm talking about the character, what the character went through.
I got you. All right. Just wanted to double check on that. I was going to have my follow up on that one, because I was like, that's interesting too. All right.
Right.
But I was looking back over some of the content you've made, and that I remember that your first video, Talking Comics, you received feedback about your comic saying you weren't really there yet. What was the hardest part of hearing the criticism in your comic producing journey?
What was the hardest part of hearing the criticism?
Mhm.
It was the criticism. It was the criticism itself. When you're young and you're up and coming, I didn't have anybody take me under their wing. I didn't have anybody show me the ropes or anything. Everything was trial by fire. I just had to jump in the water, And so of course, when you jump in the water and you think you could swim, but you start to sink because you're flapping your arms and legs around doesn't mean you're swimming. And so it was really hard for me to take all that criticism at the beginning, but then finally met one editor who actually sat me down and told me right off the bat, look, don't take it personal. Don't ever take this personal because you're in the wrong business if you take anything that you put out there personal if someone criticizes it. Just know that I'm doing my best. I'm going to do my best to help you to see what your shortcomings are, so that way you can work on them. And he told me, oh, your dialogue is sharp and good. There's a few hiccups here and there you need to work on, but otherwise you're pretty good there. But here's the other stuff you need to work on. And that's when he told me, leave your ego at the door when it comes to criticism, because the whole point of an editor telling you this isn't working is because they want you to grow. They want you to get better. And then once that other switch in me turned on, that's when I finally, it took a few years. It wasn't overnight, where I started to practice leaving my ego at the door and not take things so seriously when someone says, hey, I read your book and there's some issues with it. And they would list them off. And I have a term that I say myself, which is let it burn. So feel that like that pain when someone criticizes your work, but feel the burn, feel it. So that way you could transform it and grow from that.
I feel the burn. I like that. I'm actually write that down.
There you go. There you go.
Feel the burn.
Yeah, feel the burn. Just take it. I mean, obviously, you got to have boundaries, right? You got to discern. You got to discern. Wait, are you being genuine or are you being an a-hole? That's what you have to discern.
All right, I like that. I like that. So as far as the creative process of comics, which would you enjoy more? Like just coming up with the idea, writing out the concepts, or is it more so the production part? Like actually, putting literally pen to paper, the production process, promoting the Kickstarter. Which one?
I would say probably 80% of that, which is the creative side. The production side is a lot of fun for me because it's great to come up with an idea and then you write it down to paper and you develop it. You grow it almost like a gardener tending their garden. You got to make sure you put the right amount of water, right amount of sunlight, and so on and so forth. And that part's always fun for me, to be able to sit down and actually figure out, okay, where am I going to take this story? Where am I going to take this character? And not only that, but also develop the backstory of all the characters, their histories. All that stuff is fun. That's the most fun for me. And the production side too, because the collaboration process is such a gratifying approach to telling the story, because obviously the artist that you provide your script to is going to have a slightly different interpretation of what they envision in their head when they read your script. And so you got to find a common ground between the two, because obviously the artist may think of something else and then sketch out some ideas, provide them back to you, and then depending on how I guess strict you are and how you want to tell your story and how you want it portrayed, you either say, it's not working out for me. You got to just stick with the script. Or sometimes, like in my case, in a lot of times, is that sometimes the artist does provide a cool idea where you're like, I didn't even think of it that way, or I didn't look at it. I never thought of it in that direction. So let's see if I could work it in what I've already developed. Unless it's something strictly like there's no wiggle room. You only have a little bit of wiggle room, as opposed to have this loose idea. Let's develop it together. But if it's something that I developed completely from scratch, like for instance, Ghetto Dragon is that. Ghetto Dragon was completely developed from the ground up, meaning
Oh, wow.
Every single character you see in that story, I've written backstories. I know when they were born, what they look like, physical descriptions, all that stuff. All of that was all created, and then the artist just drew what I wrote in descriptions. So it just depends.
Wow. So it's like it sounds like it's almost like writing a prompt and giving it to the artist and them drawing a physical description of what you've written out for them. Is it kind of like that, or okay?
Yeah, it was pretty much like that. And then sometimes they would do different interpretations. Like, no, he's got to look like this. He's got to wear this. He's 6 foot. He's not buff. He's and like those kind of things. Okay. Which are minuscule. Story wise, yeah. If I'm set with the story, it's like, sorry, we're not going to develop the story further. The story's already been developed. This is what I want. This is the story I want.
I see.
They stick with it.
And is that something that you tell them, like, hey, for this story, I want to go from here to here? Or do you just like see where it kind of goes, say, hey, stop here because I don't need to go further than this? Like, I'm trying to figure out what the cutoff point is, because I know that I know that seems collaborative between the artist and the writer, but I know that sometimes there can be not clash, but like, hey, we just set a boundary around how far this character can go within this story. So I don't know how often that happens.
It's best to always get ahead of it. So the moment are you a writer yourself? Are you planning on producing your own books?
No. I leave that to professionals, man. I leave that to professionals.
That's fair. Well, for me, I always right when I hire an artist, I tell them right off the bat, look, here is the deal. It's either it's gonna be this, and you can't go outside this box. However, you do have leniency towards, like, for instance, when you read the script and say the script calls for, I don't know, 6 panels, for instance. Okay. And then they give me a thumbnail that has 8 panels, for instance, or sometimes less. Oh, I could do this in 4 panels instead. And then if I see that it works better than my 6 panel, what I wrote on in my script, then I go, oh, you know what, this works better. Let's stick with this.
Oh.
And then that gives the artist a little bit of creative freedom to have a little bit of fun with the story. And that's another rule of mine too, is now I've done this long enough to know now that if an artist doesn't show enthusiasm for what I've laid out for them to draw, then I tend not to hire them.
Really?
Yeah, because there, in my experience, there's got to be a little bit of enthusiasm to what you present, or else where's the fun that comes with drawing the book? If it feels like work, if it feels like, oh, I have to do this, I'm getting paid, but I'm not really digging the story, then you're going to get a subpar product in the end. But if you have a story that they're excited about, oh, I'm really excited to draw this, which is why when you read book 1 and book 2, you got to feel like, whoa, this is pretty intense, because the artists that I hired are excited to draw the story because they're fans of Bruce Lee. They always wanted to draw martial arts comics, so it fit what they wanted to draw, and that's why it shows on the page.
That is very true. I mean, it was brutal. Guys, we will get to Ghetto Dragon, believe me, because I started, couldn't put it down. Not gonna lie to you guys. But yeah, it was quite awesome. And so I guess the other thing is that in that vein of saying you feel the burn, is that not many people in general, let alone artists, who kind of bear their feelings on paper for the rest of us, would be so comfortable discussing their struggles. And I saw that you've done a series called Tales from the Struggling Writer. Yeah. I want to know, like, what led you down that path to be that vulnerable and put that out online for the rest of us to see?
Part of it was because I at the time when I was producing that series, there wasn't a lot of stuff out there about struggle. It was always about triumphs. It was about someone's triumph, but no one ever talks about the struggle that comes with that. People think that success happens overnight. Wow, this person's overnight success. When in reality, the overnight success came from, it's like an iceberg. Kind of, you see the on the outside or on the surface, it looks like just a glacier, but underneath is this big, huge, piece of ice that could take out any big, boats that we have in the world, right? So, I thought, you know what, it'd be good to show this off or share this because, again, like I mentioned earlier, it was everything was that I learned was trial by fire. I had to make a lot of mistakes because, again, there was no one that I knew who showed me the ropes, like I said, or pointing me in the right direction. It was all like, okay, I'm just going to jump in and see where what kind of mistakes I make and then learn as I go. And so I thought, why not share that? Because what if 5 years from now, 10 years from now, another up and coming young artist wants to jump in, but they don't know where to start. Hopefully they'll find my videos and see, okay, yeah, actually I am going through that. I'm going through that, right? The same thing. Maybe I can learn something from this video series and see if I can learn from this person's mistakes, so that way I won't make those mistakes when I'm trying to make it in the industry.
No, that's actually, that was actually very well done. I actually appreciate you being that vulnerable, especially in the writing space. And, usually if you ever do see the struggles that someone writes, it's they're uber successful. And it's way back the time. It's like, well, hey, I'll hook you up, bro. I'll hook you up.
Those are cool shades. I'll admit that.
Thank you. And, it's like they're so successful that them talking about their struggles sounds completely disingenuous. So the fact that you're saying, hey, look, I've been at this for a while, but it's not like what you see in the product has been easy to do. And, even just the characters that you were telling me that you had concepts for in the struggles and saying how like, hey, it started this way, but, my girl said, hey, why can't she be a chick? Oh, yeah. I think about that. Yeah. I talk about my wife all the time in that vein. Is like she'll say something that I've not thought of at all. You're just like, I should do that.
Yeah.
So it sounded like what you said. He's like, she should be a chick. Wow, that's good. You can't take them too high with it because then they'll do it for everything. But you're just for this, you're right. So when you were describing one of the characters, basically the character I think he's great is basically she's not a street fighter by trade, but she knows how to fight. And it's just that all the fights that the descriptions tell me she get into sound way more brutal because it's a woman involved. And like, hey, I'm still gonna throw hands with you. I don't care how big and strong you are. I'm still throwing hands.
Yeah.
But I got knives and I got other contraptions. I'm not playing around. A lot of movies you see, they'll have like one that's 112 pounds going against a guy that's 210. There's no knives, there's no guns, there's no leverage. And like you just had Hurricane Rana, a big guy, and then expect him to get knocked out from like your little tiny fist, So
exactly. And that was the challenge. That was the challenge for that story, was that I didn't want to fall in that trap of like, this invulnerable, invincible heroine, right? I wanted someone who was desperate to make it out, because not only was she trying to save herself, she's saving the other kids, the other victims that now she's involved in and responsible for. And so that was the biggest challenge, but it was the most fun I ever had writing something like that, because it really did put me in the position where like, wait a second, how is she going to get out of this one? And so I had to come up with different scenarios to see how she gets out of it without losing the reader to, I know it's a comic book and I understand that we have to suspend our disbelief, but Robert McKee, who wrote Story in his book, did say that when you set up the parameters for the reader, your rules of your fictional world, as he called it, if you establish that in the beginning, then you got them. But if you step out of that box, you lose the reader, and that's not what you don't want. That you don't want to lose the reader.
That man, you are saying it like it is. That is I appreciate when you give me. World building isn't the correct way, but you set parameters. I like the way you set parameters.
Yeah.
And as long as you told me that these are the parameters, you've given me enough freeway in my mind within that framework. Like there's a lot of freedom in the framework you've given. So these things are likely to happen. These things are not. So if something doesn't happen or if something does happen, it's like, hey, this isn't a completely extenuating circumstance, and I'm going to explain it because we're here. So, I really appreciate that in the story with Ghetto Dragon 1 and 2, you give us that.
Good.
The other, hey man, like I said, I read it and I was like, I'll be honest in the critique. I do like the framework that you've given for volumes 1 and 2 on there. I guess the other thing I liked is you saying that everyone's welcome in your comic book universe. I know that regardless of what political aisle or any other aisle you're on, there can be a tendency to say that if you don't like it, don't watch, read, partake of it, whatever. So it's refreshing to hear someone say, hey, everyone's welcome here. I appreciate your patronage. I mean, what led you down that thinking? I know that you've been at this for a while, but what led you to just say, hey, I'm going to open this up to everybody?
Honestly, it's just part of my inner nature, man. I've always been that way in my life, in my personal life, as just a human being. I've always been, an open. Pretty much everyone's invited. Of course, it's I kind of view my social media platforms as like a party, a house party.
Nice.
You're welcome to the house party, right? Come on down, have a few drinks, have a good time. We could talk and hang out and have a good time at this party at my house. But the moment you disrespect my house, you're out. And that's the rule I have, is that you're welcome here, and by all means, go right ahead to critique my work. You can even say it to my face. I'm not gonna take it personal, again, because I've learned to let go of that old ego self. But if you disrespect, you're out. You're out of my house, because you're killing the vibe in my house. Right. So it's that's where it came from. It came from the whole idea of like. Also, I'm a little bit old school as well. In terms of when you're selling a product. Yeah, you do want to sell it to as many people as possible. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
You want as many people to read your book and enjoy it. Not only read it, but also enjoy it. Enjoy your story. So that way, hey, man, you got any more? Because I really enjoyed this one. You got any more stuff you're working on? And that's the whole point of doing that. And I know that in these days, it's kind of tough to be that way, because it's become kind of tribalistic. Not kind of. It has become tribalistic, completely tribalistic. You gotta associate with a certain group of people in order to, I guess, be part of a major group. But I like to build fences. Bridges. I like to build bridges towards people. I like to try to understand my fellow man, because we only have one life, and life's tough as it is. So my personal role is, everyone has a line, right? You have a line. I have a line. The people watching the stream right now have lines. It's just, where's your line at? And my line is, if you want to have a heated debate with me, I'm down. I'm down to have a debate with you. But don't disrespect me as a person. And I won't disrespect you as a person. You have your beliefs. I have mine. We could coexist. That's what makes the United States a great place. It's not perfect.
Sure.
But it's the fact that I don't know you. You don't know me, but you let me on your platform, your show, because that's who you are. You want to also. I imagine you also want the same thing. You also want to talk to as many people as possible and converse with them about their work and comic books, because we all love comic books at the end of the day. Not just comic books, but also pop culture, like movies and TV and what have you. So that's where it came from. It came from my own, upbringing and my own inner nature as a person.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. I had a flash on my camera. Just give me 1 second. I'm trying to
sure, no problem.
Fix the camera angle here. One moment. I guess the other thing I was going to ask you before we get to Ghetto Dragon as well is you moderated a live stream a couple months back. It was actually really good. It was about about asking if the crowd should fund comics.
Oh, yes.
And I know that you moderated it, but I wanted to know, what do you make of the current state of crowd-funded comics, aka should the crowd fund the comics?
Yeah, it's still a great tool for indie creators. 20 years ago, if there was the industry was gatekept 20 years ago, meaning you had to go to the cons, you had to go and put your book out there in front of editors and what have you, some blind submissions to publishers, and crowdfunding pretty much took all that down. And now anyone can get their book funded. Now you just, instead of convincing an editorial panel that's from Dark Horse or Image or Marvel or whatever, now you get to convince a whole crowd of people. And I think that's a great way for indie creators like myself to get out there and put their stuff out there. So, some creators currently make a living doing crowdfunding campaigns, and that's great. If it works for them, fantastic. But some don't. Like for me right now, I'm like really low. I'm not even close to hitting my goal. But there's a lot of things that I could have done differently that I didn't. And also there's a lot of factors in real life, right? There's a lot of things that get in the way of that. And so I didn't really get a chance to really campaign as much as I would have wanted to, or what I planned originally when I launched Ghetto Dragon. But hey, that's the name of the game. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but you just got to keep on going. Okay. But it's still, well, let me just add on that it's still a great tool. It's just that now it's a matter of how you approach it as an individual creator. So if you're making a living off crowdfunding comics, great. You already got it in. You're always going to continue that. But if you're someone who like me or someone who's starting out, I recommend they and everyone to build up a readership first, and then funnel them to the crowdfunding. So you got to prove yourself that you are a capable storyteller in order for them to be like, you know what, I'll give this artist a lift, a boost over the fence, sort of say, to make it over the fence, to make it to the other side. So it's still, like I said, a great tool to use. I don't think it's going away at all. I think it's going to be the future from here on out. You just got to know how to use it. Oh, did I get lost? Did I lose the host of the show? I think I may have. It's now become my show. So yeah, it's all good. Am I like the only one on here? Because if I am, then I'll keep on talking if you want. So yeah, any questions for the chat? Now that you're waiting for E.G.O to get his audio issues situated. Anyone in the chat has any questions or any comments, let me know. I'm going to read it here in the chat. But to add on to what I was saying, crowdfunding is a great way for people like readers who like you who to determine whether or not something is worth the time and money to get produced. And I know a lot of the time crowdfunding gets a bad rap because there's been a lot of people who have been burned in indie comics in terms of crowdfunding. A lot of books were not fulfilled. A lot of books have been late, maybe sometimes years late. I mean, I for one was late on one of my books because the artist I worked with not in the middle, but about a quarter into the book we were producing together, he wanted to change his art style. And it went from stark black and whites to he wanted to change it to ink wash. And so I told him, look, man, if you do this, it's going to cause the delay of getting our book done at the time that we promised backers that we're going to get their books. And we're going to have to let them know that it might be a year late before they get their books. And we agreed that was the best course of action. So we communicated that to the backers, and thankfully they were absolutely fine with that. And we didn't get no refunds. They actually pretty much backed us up until we finally were able to finish the book and fulfill it and get it to the readers. So that was something there that was well worth it, because that also taught me that communication is important when it comes to crowdfunding. I don't know if anyone in the chat has ever backed a campaign. If you have, sorry, I just read one of the comments. Good one, R2 the Icky. You made me lose my train of thought. Oh gosh, I lost my train of thought. Jeez. I don't know if you guys ever backed a crowdfunding campaign. Maybe you guys can let me know your experience doing it. And the other thing that I also notice when people back campaigns and they get the books, most people don't read them. And I've always wondered why. So he's asking the questions via the chat. So He says, love the E.G.O says, love the fighting panels and the brutality of the martial arts in Ghetto Dragon. Whose fighting style does Matt, your main character, emulate, and why? Well, it's pretty obvious from the sweater he's wearing. Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee was the character, is not character. He's the individual that was the major influence on Ghetto Dragon. My mom, God rest her soul, was a fan of Bruce Lee, and she introduced her movies to me when I was growing up, and so I was a huge Bruce Lee fan ever since I was a kid. And so Jeet Do is the name of the martial arts style that Bruce Lee created, essentially. And when I looked into his life and I found out who he was as a person outside the movie star and outside his movies, and I learned that he created this martial arts style, which he called a style with no style. Jeet Do is a street fighting style. It's essentially not the video game, but it's essentially what he calls Mortal Kombat, because in the street fight, anything goes. Anything can go wrong. Anything can go one way or the other. It doesn't matter how big or small your opponent is. If your opponent manages to get a hit in, a good one, it's over. You could be, like I say, you could be facing a guy who's 5'2", 5'2" guy facing a 6 foot guy, and if that 5'2" guy is able to manage to hit his chin in the right way, in the right angle, at the right time, that guy's going down. And so Bruce Lee's Jeet Do style was pretty much, the attempt to teach people how to defend themselves in a street fight. And his approach was the immediate takedown of your opponent. So if you're in a street fight, if you just happen to be in a street fight for any reason, you try to de-escalate, it's not working, the person is set to fight you, then your goal, if you're a practitioner of Jeet Do, is to make sure that if this person comes at me, I'm going to take him out as soon as possible, because the longer a street fight goes on, the bigger chances you have of losing or getting really injured, mortally injured, right? Gassed out, whatever the case, and then you raise the chances of your opponent being able to best you in the fight. And Bruce Lee's style is essentially teaching you how to be alert in those situations, how to not get around those situations, but how to dismantle your opponent quickly in that situation, because you don't want to end up in the hospital, right? And of course, you don't want to hurt your opponent either, but sometimes when you're in that situation, you got to defend yourself, and that's what Jeet Do was. So I bought one of his books called The Tao of Jeet Do, which is something that he wrote, and he did he had drills and workout, how to work out properly when you do that kind of thing. And I read that book. I bought a copy and I read it, and there's a few chapters in there that was called The Philosophy of Jeet Do, and he provided a lot of philosophical ideas as to what Jeet Do can do for you as an individual person who hopefully not, but possibly may have to defend himself one day in a street fight. So after reading the story, that book really did help with the development of Matt Guerra, the Ghetto Dragon, which is, well, what will it look like if Bruce Lee's Jeet Do style was practiced by a young kid who grew up in the ghetto and is, lives by the code, practices Jeet Do daily, and what does that look like when they get attacked? How will they go about that? And that was the idea for Ghetto Dragon. So that was the major influence, was Bruce Lee. So yeah, there was that. Let's see. He goes on. LeftEye says, this book looks like it could have taken place anywhere, but which town, city does Ghetto Dragon take place? It's a little city in Orange County in Southern California called Santa Ana. It was a city that I was raised in. There was a lot of gang activity during my childhood, which was around like late 80s, early 90s. And the city has this, it's an old city, one of the oldest cities in California. So there's a lot of, the city has a bunch of back alleys, just a bunch of them. It's like, we used to call them shortcuts, because we just walked through the alley and boom, we ended up at at our favorite store in no time, as opposed to taking the sidewalks. However, there was a risk that if you did walk the back alleys, the street gangsters would hang out there, in their garages or in the alleyways, in the corner of the alleys. And so it was obviously, we were told by our parents to never walk down the alley at night, only during the day. And for the most part, they left you alone, especially if they knew you, especially if they recognized you, they would always leave you alone. A lot of the time they would back you up in case you got in trouble, because they recognized you as a kid. Oh, it's a little kid who lives down the street. And then they would leave you alone for the most part. It wasn't as bad as most major metropolitan cities in the country. It was still ghetto, but not as intense as, the other cities, like I said, in the rest of the country. And so, Santa Ana was pretty much the backdrop. That was my upbringing there. And my older brother was also an active gangster himself. He was part of a street gang. And, he shared with me a lot of stories as to what they did, how they went about their day, what they did for money, because they didn't work. A lot of these street gangsters never had day jobs in their lives. So when I got older and he found out that I wanted to be a writer, he asked me, oh, wait, let's have a sit down one day and I'll tell you whatever story you want. And just know that you might not like to hear a lot of it, but at this point I don't care. I'll tell you, because I know you won't rat me out or whatever. So yeah, there was a lot of sessions that I sat down with my older brother, and he just told me story after story about the street politics, about how the different gangs in the city would solve their problems that they would have. Whenever street beefs would arise, he would tell me the politics behind that, like what will be the retaliation, what will be greenlit, as the term is known. And then he would, all that stuff fascinated me when he told me. So when I developed Ghetto Dragon, again, God rest his soul, my brother is no longer with us, but there was a little tribute. The main character, the main bad guy, Dreamer, was his name. When he was in the street gang, that was his nickname. So that was my little homage to my older brother. But he so everything that he taught me in terms of how the street politics worked during his time, I implemented it in the Ghetto Dragon. Obviously I just fictionalized it and I sensationalized it a bit. So that's where I got that from. It's pretty much takes place in Santa Ana, but you're right. When I wrote the story, I made sure that I wrote it in a way where it does feel like it could be anywhere that it could take place. So kudos for you for catching that. Is there any other questions? Man, I hope you got the whole thing situated, man. It sucks that this happened. I guess today is just not the day, huh? Going to show the Kickstarter for Ghetto Dragon. Okay, cool. I know there's one other question that I liked, which was about the I guess we could talk about it when you show the Kickstarter, but I'll wait until that one. Other than that, whoever's watching, how's your day? How's your Monday? Hopefully you guys had a good Monday and a good weekend. Okay, we could talk about it. Okay. So I know one of the questions you asked me was about there's a section in the story, which I don't want to give away too much away, but the main character journals as he's trying to get back at the gang who attacked his family. And where the idea I got for that was that I used to journal myself when I started writing. I would always carry a journal with me. Whenever I would take the bus to work or during my lunch breaks at work, I would always write in my journal. It was pretty much anything. It could be my thoughts or some ideas or story ideas that I may have had that one day I would develop into a full-blown comic book story. But for the most part, it was mainly thoughts that would come out. I would just have these thoughts and ideas that I would just write down. And I have just a whole box full of these journals filled up of just a bunch of entries and ideas, and that's pretty much where I got the idea with exposition, the exposition idea to tell the story in Ghetto Dragon. Are we good, E.G.O? You still having some technical difficulties? Yeah, looks like. Do I know the story between Bruce Lee and Jean LaBelle? I don't think so, actually, R2 the Icky. I don't think I have. I mean, I know of other Bruce Lee stories, like, for instance, when he went out and about to pretty much share his martial arts to the world, to the U.S. and also to other places, other kung fu tournaments. I mean, he was not humble in his approach to proclaiming that his style was the best style of martial arts, because again, like I mentioned earlier, his style was the style with no style, which is the reason why whenever you see a Bruce Lee movie, he's always hopping around, he's always making these noises, because that was part of the psyching out of his opponent, because his opponent didn't know where he was going to go. Is he going to go left? Is he going to go right? Why is he screaming like that at me? I don't know what he's doing. It was all to psych out your opponent, so that way when you get in and you get that knockout punch, you're going to get the knockout punch. But yeah, I don't know the story of Bruce Lee and Jean LaBelle, but I do know that when he did proclaim that his style was the best, he had a lot of people challenge him in the street. You know, like literally challenge him to the street of like, I could take you out. And then of course he'd be like, all right, well, let's give it a shot. And they would have their fight. And of course, Bruce Lee would always best them, because at the time, now it might be a little hard. If Bruce Lee were alive today, I think he would have had a little bit of trouble because of MMA. MMA is kind of like a little bit of Jeet Kune Do. It's mixed martial arts. It's pretty much a mixture of all sorts of styles of martial arts. So maybe in this day and age, it probably would have been a little hard for Bruce Lee to fight his opponents, because he would face a whole bunch of people who had have their own mixed martial arts background and be able to keep up with him. That's my opinion. All right, let's see here. I'm going to try to share my. There might not be any sound. See, my sound may not work for some reason. I don't know why StreamYard doesn't let me share my sound whenever I do click on the share sound. So I'm gonna try something here. Maybe I could work it here somewhere. So let's see. It says here that Jean LaBelle was a well-known stuntman in Hollywood and world champion judo master. Bruce was a bit arrogant on the set of Green Hornet. When the people that worked on the set, they had Jean challenge him, and he was the first American to defeat him, and then they became best friends, and Bruce incorporated judo into his style. That scene in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood between Bruce Lee and Brad Pitt is based a bit off that encounter. Oh, interesting. Okay, I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. See, that's cool. You know, that's one of the main reasons why Bruce Lee was one of my favorites, is because he at least was able to humble himself to know, hey, you bested me. Cool. You know, I'm gonna like you say, after that he incorporated judo into his style. And once again, that only adds to his contribution to the martial arts world, the kung fu world, which is he wasn't closed off. He was open. He was open to, you know what, I'm going to now implement this, because remember, the core philosophy of Jeet Kune Do was style with no style. So it makes sense that he did that. It makes sense that he incorporated judo into his style, because why not? That's the whole point of Jeet Kune Do, is that you could take from as many styles as you want, because in the street fight, there's no rules, right? There's no moderator there telling you, okay, here's the rule, guys. You can't out gouge, you can't do this, you can't do it now. In the street fight, you're going to go until someone goes down, right? So, yeah, kudos. That's a cool story, dude. Thank you for sharing that. That's really cool. All right, I'm gonna try this, E.G.O. Okay, just give me a second. Let me just see if I can do it this way. here we go. Let's see. Let's try this out. Let's see. Where is this at? Right here. Yeah, thank you. I did get a kick out of that story. That's cool. All right, I shared my screen. Go ahead, E.G.O. If you see it there, it's a black box next to my. Yeah, let's see. Again, guys, I'm sorry if the audio does not play. Like I said, for some strange reason, StreamYard does not like to pick up my audio when I share my screen unless I open a different browser, and that's what I try to do here. So let's try it out. Let's see if you guys hear it. Let me know if you can hear it. Yeah, I figured. All right, let me try another way. I'm going to try this way. Hopefully this works out better. Here we go. Let's try this. And let's try... All right, let's try this. Go ahead, E.G.O.
It was an ordinary night during
How's
an
that?
ordinary jog when Matt Guerra stepped into his destiny.
Cool.
Using his Jeet Kune Do, Matt teaches would-be violators that the cost of crime is too high for them to afford. But little does Matt know, his act of bravery has run afoul of Los Valientes, Orange County's most notorious street gang. The head of Los Valientes, the mysterious dreamer, decides to make an example out of Matt. And amidst a brutal game of tit for tat, where anyone could get caught in the crossfire, Matt Guerra must bring an end to Los Valientes' wave of crime before his loved ones pay the ultimate price for his heroism. Matt Guerra is the Ghetto Dragon.
There you go. And that's it. Thank you. Thank you, E.G.O. Yeah, the trailer was created by Animane. I think that's his handle on Twitter or on X. He did a fantastic job with that trailer. He just pretty much encapsulated the whole story into that trailer, and I thought it was a brilliant trailer that I still use to this day. And I think I'm going to use it forever because it just did a great job telling what the story's about. Yeah. Also, you know Animane, LeftEye, because that's cool if you do, because he does great work, and hopefully down the line he and I can work together because I know he's a martial arts enthusiast as well, and so hopefully in the near future he and I are going to get to work together because I thought he did a great job with the Ghetto Dragon trailer. Okay, final question. Here we go. Far into the not too distant future, Ghetto Dragon is optioned by Amazon Prime as a live action show. You're asked to consult on casting your characters for the show. Who do you cast and why? Honestly, man, I would much rather have this be an animated movie or an animated show, like an anime. I would much rather have that. I don't know why. It just feels like a better fit, a more natural fit to have a story like this be an anime. A live action, I mean, if just for the sake of the what if, it would have to be an unknown actor. It would have to be an unknown actor who can act and can do martial arts. I would prefer that. But other than that, I really don't have any like, oh, it'd be great if I could get this actor or this actress or this director. None of that. I would much rather have it be an anime because I believe the anime will do this story more justice than a live action would. And that's just my opinion. I would much rather fly to Japan and shop this around to anime companies to see if who's willing to take the risk on this property and make it into an anime show. Because this book 1 and book 2 of Ghetto Dragon is well. Let me give you a little more context as to what I have envisioned for Ghetto Dragon, and it's going to be a lot. Just bear with me a bit. So I'm sure we all know right now at this moment in our history, manga has been beating the crap out of American comic books in terms of sales. Not just sales, but popularity. I mean, the comic shop that I used to go to for years and years since I was in my early 20s when I first found this shop, about, I don't know, let's see, 5 years ago, they did a whole redo of their interior of their store. So they cleaned it up nicely, because before it was a bit cluttered. You know, they had a bunch of cool old stuff there, vintage stuff. So that was one of the main reasons why I like going to that shop, because it felt like a comic shop that's been around for a long time. But you know, the owner thought it was time to update or upgrade his interior of the store. So he did. He just totally cleaned up the whole thing. And before he did that, there was maybe, I would say, because there, you know, you walk in the store, there's wall here and the wall on the far back, and in between the walls were the back bins that he would have there that you could look through. And so on the left-hand side, when you walk in the store, there was maybe, I'm going to say, one row of manga. Just one row, just one long row that filled up his wall from the beginning to the end. Not the whole wall, because the rest were all trade paperbacks, Marvel, DC, and on this side were all his, you know, the new comic books that came out every month, and the back would be just toys that he had there randomly. And so just one row of manga. That's all he had. And so when he redid his store, and when I came back, you know, once he reopened the store, that entire left wall, man, I'm not kidding, from the not the ground, but the middle, you know, from your mid waist here all the way to the ceiling, manga, full of manga. And you know, when I talked to the owner about it, he said, "Well, you know, that's what the kids are asking me nowadays. They're asking for manga. They're no longer asking for, you know, Flash or Batman or Superman. And if they do, they always ask me, well, where do I start? Where do I start with?" And obviously he can't say Action Comics #1, because there's no Action Comics #1, even in trade, you know. And if you do find it in trade, it's a little pricey to get Action Comics #1. And on top of that, it was written so differently back then. It's not the Superman that we know today, right? So it's starting points for young readers is tough for if you're an American comic book reader, because you read, there's no book 1 or volume 1. Manga, on the other hand, you can. My nephew, in one of his birthdays, he asked me he wanted a comic book, and I thought, great. He said I'm going to convert a new kid to, you know, collect comic books. And then when we got there, he said, "Oh, Uncle, do you think they have One Piece here?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course they have One Piece here." So he went right to the manga section. He grabbed books 1, 2, 3, and 4. And here's what I want for my birthday. And I bought him One Piece, books 1, 2, 3, and 4, starting point. And that's the advantage that manga has over American comics, which is why a lot of new readers prefer manga, because A, there's a good starting point, and then B, let's face it, the storytelling artwork in manga far supersedes what we have today in the American market. Exactly, R2 Icky. That's very common now. Kids that age are into manga because, like I said, they're and also the stories are compelling. They're so good, and the artwork is so great. That's what's pretty much not killing, but that's why we're losing to mangas, because the manga creators know what readers like and they don't change it. And that's the same idea I have for Ghetto Dragon. I want to have that same thing. However, I don't want to do a manga because I'm not, all due respect, I'm not Japanese. I'm American. I like American comic books. I grew up on American comic books. So the advantage that indie creators have today is is that we can if we want to create a series, for instance, our own series. Like I have Ghetto Dragon. There's other indie creators out there who want to kickstart their own characters, their own stories. Our advantage over the mainstream corporate comics like Marvel and DC and Dark Horse and what have you, we can start with the starting point. We can start with book 1. We can start with book 2. And that's the idea I have for Ghetto Dragon book 1, book 2. There's going to be Ghetto Dragon book 3, book 4, book 5, and so on and so forth. It's not going to be an ongoing. It's a finite story. So I'm eventually going to, tell the whole story. That's the idea, is to tell the whole story of the Ghetto Dragon saga. And so here's the beginning of it. Book 1 is the start of it all. Is the introduction of this character. It's the storyline that's going to change the course of his destiny forever within the confines of the lore I developed over the 10 years that it took me to develop this story. And that's another thing that I want to share with you guys, that this is not a story I came up with a year ago. This was pretty much close to 15 years in the making, of just constant fixing, changing. No, it's not working. This is working. And constantly, here's, I developed book 1 and eventually book 2, book 3, and I eventually developed the whole storyline. So I know where he's going to go after this. And I'm hoping to go 10 books. So I'm hoping book 10 is the last book where I finish the story, I'm done, and it's over. The Ghetto Dragon saga will forever live between books 1 and 10. And that's the idea here, which is why for the Kickstarter, I really wanted to start strong with the 10K goal, because that would help me, keep the books going. And, book 2 is currently being penciled, and we're about 95% done pencil wise. And then I have to ink it, get the inks done, get the colors done, and do it again, the crowdfunding for book 2 and so on and so forth. Eventually get to the point where I could release Ghetto Dragon book whatever quarterly, maybe two a year. So one for the first quarter, and then the second one for the last quarter of the year, and so on and so forth. So that's the plan. Thank you guys for joining tonight. Another episode of LeftEye. Just did an awesome job with my audio and mic issue. It's always welcome back to the show, and if no one else did today, want you to know that no matter what, you are enough for Julius and myself. We are out, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.